you for joining us for the Victory Podcast today. Today's podcast is from February 23rd, 2014. We continue our study through the book of Mark with Pastor Trevor in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. We're glad you joined us today. Welcome.
Last week we saw Jesus in action in a chaotic situation that came from without. Remember the storm, the wind, the waves, the sea. They were out in the middle of the boat, and they were going from, they're sailing across the Sea of Galilee from Capernaum down, and we saw this thing. The disciples were stuck in a boat in a situation that they had nothing to do with. This external circumstance that came from without was attacking them, and Jesus was asleep in the boat, and Jesus got up. They were afraid, and he calmed the sea. He just said, "Peace, be still," and the wind ceased, and the waves were calm. And that was what it was handled. This week we see another kind of chaos entirely. This is the kind of chaos that's from within. We see a tormented soul. We see a guy who was possessed by demons, who was beyond struggling. First, before we get into that, I'll just show you real quick. They were up here. They started out up here last week, and they sailed down to this area right here, and it was the area of the Gadarenes. I forget how Milt pronounced it. They say it different in different places, but he did a much better job than me. But anyway, he came down to this area, and then this is the Decapolis that he was talking about. The 10 cities that make up the Decapolis are down there. So anyway, that's where they were. It says here, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, I believe is how Milt said it. It sounded great. The Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now, we hear about and see all these things in Scripture about demon possession. You know, these guys were possessed by demons. I remember we had someone coming to the church one time, and they had issues. I mean, issues. And they were extremely bipolar and or manic or something. I can't remember what it was. It's been a while, but it was when this person was normal, everything was normal. But when this person wasn't, it so wasn't. And I remember I was trying to deal with this person one day, and a guy came up, a guy that was going to the church at the time was there, and he kind of pulled me to the side, and he rebuked me. He's like, "Listen, you're the pastor. She's clearly demon-possessed. It is up to you to cast that demon out." I was like, "Pardon?" I don't know. We didn't go to the same Bible college, clearly, because I don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to mess with that. I don't understand it. I'm not one of those people. So I've always been a little bit confused as to the whole demon-possessed thing, right? I've seen the movies. I've seen The Exorcist, and I'm not sure if that's what it looks like or not. But if it is, it's pretty wiggity whack, But I tend to think of things in terms of how do we deal with this today? How am I going to handle this today? I don't know how Jesus knew that these people were demon possessed. He does. He's God. He knows those things. I'm not that guy. I'm just a normal person. I'm just a regular guy. I don't know if somebody's demon possessed or not, but I do know there are demons out there. I do know Satan's real. I do know we have sinful natures, and I do know that there's forces out there that are constantly whispering in our ears, wanting to get us bound up in addiction, wanting to get us bound up in whatever demons they happen to be, and that oppress us and possess us just as much as this guy was possessed by demons. We all have what we call demons, correct? We all have besetting sins. We all have things where the devil's always constantly in our ear. Demons are constantly in our ear telling us how great things are going to be. And we're foolish to believe that there isn't a spiritual realm out there. There is a spiritual warfare that's going on. There's no doubt about it. We are never commanded to get too involved in that situation other than knowing that it's there and trusting in Jesus, right? I don't mess around with it. I don't, it's just not my thing. Maybe for some people it is. It's not mine. All right? I trust in Jesus. Jesus indwells me, and according to Scripture, he who is in me is greater than he who is in the world. Right? This guy he had a life of chaos. How many of you know what it's like to have a life of chaos? You know what it's like to never have a still moment, to never be calm, to never have peace in your heart. A lot of us were there before we were Christian. A lot of us were there after we're Christians. I saw something on Facebook the other day. I forget. Somebody from here might have put it on Facebook. I don't remember. But it said, it was a comedian, and he asked the question. He said, some people ask me what it's like to have 4 kids. And my answer is, it's like drowning and then someone handing you a baby. Yeah, that's a really good way to put that. And kids cause chaos. Your life, I didn't appreciate my solitary life with my beautiful wife before we had kids. It was like we were just young, we got married, we were going through that phase where you fight, you're just working things out, You're fighting. I was losing a lot, was what was happening. And but we were going through that phase where you're just, you're trying to figure life out, and then all of a sudden, you have a baby, and then you're like, oh man, we should have went out on dates far more, because now it's like, the old Cinderella song, you don't know what you got till it's gone. But thank you. Yeah, now you know why I don't lead worship. But anyway, but you have this situation where it's total chaos. This guy is full of demons. As a matter of fact, the demon's name is Legion, which means many. I don't know anything about being demon possessed. I don't think, but I think this would be one of the worst ones to have, if you were. The one who's like, oh, we're a ton of us in here, We're just a party, We're just in here and we're running. That would be the worst. And check out, I think we can see examples from today if we look at these first 5 verses. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. This guy lived in a graveyard. But here's what I think we can do with this passage is see what sin really does. Sin causes chaos. There's nothing more personified in sin than a demon-possessed person. They are so bound up in sin that there's demons actually living in him. Sin causes chaos. In our lives, right now, regardless of your relationship with Christ, if there's sin in your life, there's chaos. Sin causes unrest, it causes chaos, and it causes us to live close to death. Because sin, lust when it's conceived brings forth sin. Sin when it's conceived brings forth death. When we're allowing sin in our lives, we're not out living in a graveyard, but we're hanging out with death. When we're allowing sin. Sin's a liar. Sin promises you things. Drugs. What does drugs promise you? It promises you an escape. It promises you a freedom of mind. It promises you some of these things, but what does it do? It binds you up and takes you into this trap and makes you dependent upon it to where nothing else matters. Beautiful families get ripped apart constantly by something as stupid as drugs, which on the outside we look at it and we think, what are you thinking? But when you're in it, you're so bound up you can't see past it because you've bought into the lie, and now you're living out in the tombs. You're living out near death because all of a sudden it's got you. It binds you. It tricks you. It attacks you. Pornography is the same way. It promises you satisfaction. It promises you, this, wonderful experience. And what does it do? It binds you up. It traps you. It's not satisfied. It's never satisfied. It's an insatiable appetite that wants more and more and more. And lives are destroyed because of that. Because you're never satisfied with what's in front of you. Sin never satisfies you. It always leaves you wanting a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And you reach a little further, you reach a little further, you reach a little further. And whether it's drugs, pornography, any other kind of anger, gossip, whatever it happens to be, lust, whatever it is, It just wants to take you a little further. It's never satisfied. It's a lie. That's what sin does. It causes chaos, and it destroys. I bet if we had a raising of hands of people in here who've seen a family destroyed, if you know a family in your family that's been destroyed by sin, we'd all raise our hands. We'd all raise our hands. You know? We've all heard the stories of young, beautiful young ladies who are 25 years old and they're in a hospital dying because of their drug habit. You know? Yeah, it's just sad. You had this actor just the other day, Super Bowl Sunday. Good actor. But I enjoyed his movies. I remember the movie called Doubt with him and Meryl Streep. One of the better movies I've ever seen. One of the better movies. It was an amazing movie. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Great actor. But sin is just never satisfied till it kills you. Till it kills you. It doesn't like you. It doesn't love you. It hates you. The devil hates you. The demons hate you. I think we'll see that borne out here shortly. When Jesus has stepped out of the boat, it's funny that as soon as Jesus steps out of the boat, here comes this guy out of that would scare me to death. If I'm just like, oh, look at the Purity Cemetery. And then this crazy guy with shackles, naked, comes running at me. Yeah, I'm out of there. I worked at a cemetery in high school. Check this out. Not high school, I'm sorry, in college. When I was in college, I was a telemarketer for a cemetery. That's about as bad as it gets right there. I would cold call people at a cemetery. I drove to the cemetery, to their office. I would get in there and get on the phone, go through a phone book, and cold call people to try to set up appointments to prearrange their funeral arrangements. And by the way, you probably should do that because those guys are vultures if you come in at need, is what they call it. At need. They would fight over you if you're at need because you're emotional and you'll spend whatever they tell you to spend. So be wary. Anyway, sorry about that. That was for free. But I worked there. One night I go out and I'm waiting on my friends. I go out to the car and I'm standing there. It's in the middle of the cemetery. The office is in the very middle of the cemetery. I'm sitting there leaning against my car. It's in the winter, so it's already dark. It's about 5:30. It's dark outside. I'm sitting there and all of a sudden somebody's like, hey buddy. Seriously, that's probably as close as I've ever come to having a heart attack. I mean, I just like, fight or flight. I turn around and it was a guy wanting money. Is what I'm like, no, you scared me to death in a cemetery. I'm not going to give you money. You might be a ghost. I don't know. So anyway, so I know kind of what it's like. They hop off the boat. They go by the cemetery. Here comes this maniac. They call him a maniac. Comes out of the tombs where he lives, naked-ish. So anyway, he lived among the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. That is exactly like sin. No one has the strength to subdue it. Man's attempt to legislate morality always fails. Always fails. Prohibition. Right? Failure. War on drugs. Failure. Every time we try to prohibit, you can't stop sin. You can't legislate sin. We have no power over sin. We can say, there are people that drink too much and abuse alcohol, so we're going to make alcohol illegal. But those people who abuse that stuff are saying, yeah, okay, right. I'm just going to go make it in my backyard. I'm going to make it in the woods. I'm going to make a ton of money off of this. I'm going to do whatever because sin can't be stopped. You can't legislate it. Man can't subdue it. We put chains on it, and what happens? You just wretch it of heart. Because man is going to do what man's heart wants it to do, and that is he's going to go out, and he's going to sin, and he's going to have his fill, and he's going to die from it. That's what we do without Jesus. That's what we do. Some of us are nicer about it than others, right? But all of us have our thing. And every time we try to accountability groups, or we try to put, go to AA or do whatever, or try to do things in our own power, we can't subdue it. Have you ever seen the show Intervention? There's like a 1% success rate on that show. Every time on that show, they have an intervention, they send them to rehab, they go, they're doing great, but then right at the end, they show the little blurb, oh, they went back, they're smoking, or they're shooting up heroin again. By the way, all this didn't work. Why? Because we can't subdue it. There's only one answer to sin. There's only one answer to sin. And all we do without Jesus is replace one sin with another sin. Is replace one habit with another habit because we got no answers. We got no answers. We can't subdue it. We put chains on it. We try to shackle it. But all we have to do is just get caught up in the tidal wave because the shackles are getting busted up. The chains are getting torn. There's nothing that we can do to stop it. It's chaos. Pure chaos. And you can see that in this guy's life. It was chaos. He was so controlled by things that were from within. He was so, in the essence of who he was so controlled with these demons that no one could stop him. And we've seen that. We've seen friends and family and loved ones that are so bound up in sin, and we do everything we can to help them and give them the resources we can to help them be on their way. And it's just, without Jesus, it's impossible. It's impossible. They just keep breaking those chains, and every time, and we can't subdue it. There's only one person that's ever subdued sin, and he defeated sin. He conquered sin, and that's Jesus. So, no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. It's chaos. His life is utter chaos. He's crying out. He's sitting in the tombs, just screaming out, desperately, no doubt. And he's cutting himself. He's just trying to get it out of him, right? He's just trying to get rid of the chaos because it's destroying his life, but there's nothing he can do about it because he's so caught up in it. You know, Paul talked about that. He said, the things that I hate, I do. And what I would do, I don't. Because without Christ, we have none of that. But then he goes into, from Romans chapter 7 to Romans chapter 8, there's therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Jesus is the answer to that chaos. And without Christ, your life is chaos. I don't care what you say. You can look as peaceful as you want, and you can say everything you want, but you're bound by sin, and you've got no hope. Without Christ, there is no hope. We can't subdue sin, and sin kills. That's the reason we're fallen. That's what is happening to us. That's why I'm bald and old, right? It's because of sin. It's true. It's because that's why we die. That's what's happening to you, is that sin happened to us, and sin kills us, right? But the beautiful thing is Jesus restores. Jesus comes in, and we're going to be with him if we know him forever in a glorified body that doesn't age, that doesn't get old, that hopefully after a good game of soccer, which will be in heaven, there will be no soreness. It'll be called football, and nobody will know what you're talking about when you say American football. That'll be a cuss word probably. So anyway, but all of you guys will love soccer. I always said soccer, God invented soccer, and everything else was just a man's fallenness trying to make it better. You know, it just doesn't work. So anyway, night and day among the tombs on the mountains, he's always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, what did he do? Nobody could subdue this guy. Jesus walks off a boat, he runs over and bows before him. That's Jesus. That's our God. That's our Savior. So he said, crying with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Now we see this is a demon talking right here. "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." It's funny that the demons beg for mercy from Jesus. We take his mercy for granted. Demons beg for it. Right? I mean, oftentimes, we wake up and think God owes us. Demons are begging for mercy when they see him. So, he says, "What have you to do with me, Jesus? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And when Jesus says it, they do it. Right? Because he wins. He's God. You know, there's this little game we used to play. What's the opposite? Red light, green light, right? Red light, stop, go, right? Jesus and everybody inevitably Satan. Wrong. They're not equal. They're not opposites. They're not opposite. Jesus is Jesus, and Satan is somebody that God invented, God created, God spoke into existence. They're not the same thing. They're not equals. One is superior. One is preeminent. One is the king, and one is clearly not. So, he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" this is just one of the things that are just like horror movie scary to me. Honestly, I don't like horror movies. I told you I watched The Exorcist. I may have been lying to you there. I don't know. I might have got through it all. I remember one time when I was we were just married. We were living in West Virginia, and we lived up on top of a hill. It was kind of a scary little old cinder block house. We made a beautiful home of it, though. And we were in there. My wife came back to West Virginia, or to Washington for a wedding, Jenny's wedding. And I was by myself, and the Blair Witch Project had just come out. And I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. And so what I did, I was like, I got my house, I turned all the lights off, I opened up all the blinds, so it'd be really spooky, you know? I didn't sleep for like 2-3 days after that. I was so wigged out, and I don't know what I was thinking. That was it for me. I don't think I've watched another. We watched one that was really weird together, but I sure wouldn't do it by myself. But this is real life. Jesus asked, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Man, that's just. Can you imagine the chaos? We deal with one addiction. You know, most of us have a besetting sin that we have a hard enough time dealing with. That causes chaos in our lives. It causes bad relationships. It causes brokenness. It causes harm. That causes different things. This guy had many. You know, these demons that lived in him were many. Can you imagine the chaos in his life? The difficulty. I mean, another passage of scripture says they couldn't keep clothes on the guy. You know? So I remember somebody preached a message out of this a long time ago, and they called it the nude dude with a rude attitude or something like that. So anyway, that's some fancy title in there. But he was sitting there, and he was just full of chaos. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now check this out. This is amazing right here. These are the demons that were occupying this guy. And these demons whisper in your ear. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. You always have that little, hey, this is all right. This will be good. You'll love this. This will help you out. This is better than, what it's saying is this is better than Jesus. And it's not. The only person that satisfies is Christ. The only person that at the end of the day you don't need any more of because you've got plenty is Jesus. The only thing that you can be satisfied in him is Christ. He gives you all of him. He's all we need, So they beg him earnestly to send him out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. There's a herd of pigs there. There's a herd of pigs. The demons are like, all right, if we can't be in a human, well, just put us in the pigs. They could care less about you. They're not about your well-being. They're about themselves. They're not about you. They're about themselves. And when we start acting like we're about ourselves instead of about Christ and about others, guess who we're acting a lot like? These demons. What do they want? Okay, if we can't be in him, send us in the pigs. Send us to the pigs. And I can't read, so I happen to bend over here. I'm not getting dramatic. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission. I love it. They had to do what they could go to the pigs only if Jesus let them. Right? And guess what? You're a child of God, and if you're getting tempted, it's Jesus giving you an opportunity to show the world how much more you love him than you love sin. If Jesus allows that, because that's not coming to your life without God, our sovereign God, allowing it to happen. Now, he gave him permission. So he gave him permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, that's a lot of pigs. The place had to smell terrible, right? Honestly, 2,000 pigs? Have you ever been around one pig? I mean, I've never raised a pig, but my cousins raised pigs, and they're just sour smelling. They're just bad. 2,000 of them? There's 2,000 of them on a hillside. Can you imagine what the hillside looked like? I mean, Hermiston was probably prettier than that hillside. But I'm just kidding. I don't know. Sorry. But you know how they root around, and they dig up all the grass, and they waller in the mud, and they do everything else? They went in, 2,000 pigs. The pigs, when the demons get in them, are like, death's worth better than this. The cliff that goes into the sea is better than our current situation. You know, well, their current situation was going to be bacon pretty soon anyway. So I guess, just cut out the middleman. But the demons go into the pigs. The pigs rush down the steep bank into the sea and drown into the sea. They just take off into the water. It's suicide. 2,000 pig suicide from that. They go down and they just all just kill themselves out of there. That's a strange story, but it's a true story. And here's what do we get out of it? What do we get out of it? Here's what we get out of it. The idea that chaos reigns where sin is changed entirely when we realize that Jesus brings peace, not just to wind and not just to waves, but inside our lives. The only way we can have true peace is in Jesus Christ. Your life may be crazy right now and you don't know which way's up. The only answer is Jesus. Your circumstances may not change, but perspective will give you peace. The perspective of eternal life, the perspective, the hope, the faith will give you that. Now let's see the human reaction to this. This ought to be a time of rejoicing. The crazy guy's better, right? The guy that we try to chain up, that's living in the grave. Obviously, you roll into town, beautiful Gadara, let's go to Gadara on vacation. Okay, so you sail over to the coast, and what's the first thing that greets you out of the cemetery? A naked guy in chains that's screaming and cutting himself. It's probably not best for tourism, I'm guessing, Yeah, but so he's better. He's better. The smell's gone. I mean, this is improved. Yeah, bacon's good though. I'll give you that. I mean, that might be a little bit of a bad thing, but the herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. So they are all wigged out. So they go and just tell everybody what happened. All I know is the maniac came down. He talked to Jesus, and Jesus sent the demon to the pigs, and the pigs ran down the hill and then drowned. But here's what probably the saddest part of this. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there. The one who could break chains, the one who was naked, the one who lived in the tombs, the one who was causing problems, the one who cut himself, the one who screamed all night and howled, the one who would greet random boats at the seashore and scare everybody half to death. The guy that was full of the demons, the guy that couldn't sit still, the guy that had no hope, was sitting there. Look, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. He's just sitting there. Where? At the feet of his new and better and eternal master. Jesus, the conqueror of sin, the controller of demons, the controller of Satan. He's won. He's got the keys of death, hell, and the grave. He went to the cross. He died for you and me. He went in the ground. He was buried for 3 days. He rose again the third day with the keys to those things. He wins. He's God. There's no doubt. There's no question. There's no compromise. That's who this is. And this guy was sitting there. He realized it. God saved him. And he was sitting there clothed with peace, calm. He didn't need the stones to cut. He didn't need to howl. He didn't need to be chained up. He was sitting there in his right mind, just soaking in the presence of Jesus. Now, what do the people do when they see this? They're afraid. They're afraid. Okay, they're afraid when the crazy guy they couldn't bind is okay. They're afraid. And they're more concerned about their pigs that just died than this human that has been saved. Look what they do. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus not to save them, not to help them, not to hang out and help my family, not to come in and do something amazing. What did they do? They begged Jesus to depart from their region. They were worse than the demons. They're like, yeah, get out of here, please. They didn't demand it. They begged him. I beg you to get out of here. You're ruining our livelihood. You ruined our pigs. You're, you know. They couldn't see past the pigs to see the human that had been changed. We live in a little bit of that society now, don't we? Where you have all this super uber concern about animals, and you see the puppy commercials, and they're sad. I mean, honestly, it tugs at your heart. The poor little puppy, and he's gotten beat. No, that's terrible. That's terrible. Who does that? Who would do that? But here's the other thing. Then we say, you know what? And do what you want with it. I'm not saying if you... But here's the mindset of the country. You know what? If you screwed around and you messed around and now you're going to have a baby, just go ahead and kill it. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. You know, what if the baby has viable life? Well, it's still your choice. You know, I mean, if it's inconvenient, you know, but save the puppies. You know, I'm not trying to belittle puppies. I love puppies, but they're not on the same level as a human being. You know what I mean? And so we've got this culture of death around us that would rather see, you know, and so the thing is, and listen, if I know people get in bad situations, they get scared, and I realize that, but I'm just saying the mindset is one that is like, hey, listen, life, not a big deal. Not a big deal. And it's crazy that, you know, it's just crazy. We're kind of backwards, you know. It's like to get rid of a baby is okay, but then somebody's been convicted by their peers and it's killed 12 people and caused tons of harm. You know, it's like, his life's precious. His life's precious. Listen, his life is precious. I'll grant you that. But if you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers and there's a certain punishment involved, then what you're doing is belittling the lives of that were the victims, not his. You're saying their lives weren't precious because he could take them and you see what I'm saying? We live in it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. So, and they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from the region. And as he was getting into the boat, so he's leaving. Fine, I'm out. As he was leaving, and by the way, it's amazing what people do when Jesus really starts to work. When Jesus really starts to work, it alienates people. It divides. It really does, because people get so, they get worried because their lifestyle starts to get changed. You know, Jesus kind of infringes on what you want to do sometimes. He changes your plans. It makes you uncomfortable because this world's not our home. Right? We're ambassadors for Christ. We're going to heaven. We're going to be with him forever one day. So our lives are already taken care of, and that gives us the ability to be able to give our lives here freely. Right? So, anyway, as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. So he's begging the opposite. They were begging him to get out, but the one who'd been changed was begging to go with. Right? So he's begging that he might go with him, and he did not permit him. You're kind of like, oh, why not? You know, but Jesus had bigger plans for the guy. You know, and sometimes we don't get our way. We don't get to go where we want to go. We don't get to do the things that we want to do, you know, in our plans, but God has something bigger and better for us, right? So he did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis, that's a group of 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. Everyone marveled. So they have Jesus calming the storm in the last chapter. Calming the storm. Chaos from without. They didn't do anything to cause that storm. They were just happened to be caught up in the circumstance. And Jesus calmed it. Then you have this guy this week who is full of chaos, internal chaos. He's got no hope. He's got nothing. All he can do is sit and howl. He rips his clothes off. He rips chains off. He's a maniac. He's full of chaos. More chaos than we could ever understand. And yet Jesus comes in and casts out the demons and saves the man. And he brings peace. Not just to the outside circumstances, but much more important, he brings peace internally. In our hearts and who we are. You see, oftentimes the peace that we rely on is the peace from within, not peace from without, because most of our lives is not peaceful circumstances, right? Most of our lives isn't peaceful circumstances. There's always a storm somewhere. There's always something happening. There's always someone sick. We're always worried about someone. Something's always going on. There's always a storm from the outside. There's always bad circumstances. But to live through these bad circumstances and have chaos on the inside too is impossible. It's impossible to find peace. But when Christ comes in and calms the heart, changes us, takes away the old nature, and we become new creatures. Old things are passed away, but all things become new. When Jesus does that to us and calms our hearts and who we are and moves in and changes us, that's peace, regardless of what comes to the outside. We know we can say, peace, be still to that, and we trust that he does that sometimes. Sometimes the storm rages, though. But always in our hearts, with Jesus, there's peace, there's calm, there's hope, there's love. He's the Savior. He's the conqueror. He's the sin conqueror. He's bigger than what's out there. And he's in us. And that brings peace.
We would like to thank you for joining us for the Victory Podcast today. This podcast is a ministry of Victory Baptist Church in Hermiston, Oregon. You can find us at 193 East Main Street in Hermiston, Oregon, 97838, or on the web at yourvictory.org.